Recap in minutes. In today's video, we will be going through a war drama film entitled A Woman in Berlin. There will be spoilers ahead, chill out and enjoy. In 1945, a German journalist, whose identity is not revealed, concentratedly writes her journal on a blank sheet of paper. Gert, her husband and a Nazi officer, will depart soon on a mission to somewhere in Europe. Thereafter, the journalist, on an elegant get-up, attends a party together with other German aristocrats. They gather to chatter about their husbands sent on a mission across Europe. They all wish them luck and prosperity on their journey. Fast forward, the city of Berlin is no longer recognizable due to thick smoke and bombarded establishments everywhere. Meanwhile, the journalist hastily flees to hide from the constant artillery discharge. The journalist and other Germans arrive at a hidden basement to take shelter. As the journalist surveys the basement, she decides to document everything she sees and experiences from then on. Then, the Red Army arrives in their street with heavy artillery and tanks. The Russians authoritatively command the Germans to surrender their weapons, yet no one follows. Moments later, the Germans open fire at them and alerts Major Andre, a Red Army commander, to commence attack on the defying Germans. He orders his men to forcibly enter German shelters and shoots on whoever rebels. Later that day, a Russian soldier furiously enters the basement where the journalist and some Germans hide. He searches for weapons to confiscate, then comes across the journalist, who can speak Russian. He orders her and two other German women to come with him. Once outside, Barbel, one of the German women, frighteningly approaches the cart full of potatoes while the Russian soldiers maliciously stare at her. One of the soldiers points his rifle at her, yet she maintains her composure and gathers tons of potatoes she can carry in her hands. After a while, Russian soldiers set up camps on the streets of Berlin and brag about what they steal in German shelters. They stare at German women with malicious intent and force their entry to shelters whenever they desire. Meanwhile, in the basement, the Germans attempt to evict a Silesian girl as she may endanger them later on. In sympathy, the journalist quickly approaches the Silesian girl to give her keys to her apartment in the attic. The Silesian girl swiftly flees to hide in the journalist's apartment. Simultaneously, Mussolini, a Russian soldier, is busy chasing a German woman to rape. The journalist courageously stops him at the cost of her being his next target. Consequently, the journalist willingly joins him to have a sexual intercourse in a hidden room. Luckily, the journalist outwits him by locking him in a room while she flees to call for help. Unstoppingly, the journalist searches for the one in command of the soldiers. The soldiers judgingly stare and laugh at her. Swiftly, she reaches Andre. She seeks help from him yet doesn't receive any. Disappointed, she goes back to the basement only to experience unlawful sexual activity from a Russian soldier. After a while, a widower offers the journalist a room in her apartment. Immediately, the journalist accepts and then goes to her almost destroyed apartment in the attic to pack up her things. She bids farewell to the Silesian girl while unable to notice the presence of Junger, a Silesian boy. Sometime later in their apartment building, Russian soldiers uninvitingly barges in and corners every German woman trying to escape. Some Germans hide their daughters to preserve their virginity whilst others fail their escape attempt. In the widow's apartment, the journalist doesn't move an inch knowing there's no chance for her to escape. Pitka, a Russian soldier, arrives and picks her to be his target to an unlawful sexual activity. Satisfied, Pitka tells the journalist for his return for more sexual intercourse with her. Disgusted, the journalist weepingly pukes after realizing there's more soldiers that will rape her soon. Thereafter, an old Russian soldier intentionally breaks the window and mirror of the journalist's room. He rapes the journalist in a demeaning manner by spitting at her face and leaving a pack of cigarettes as his payment. As the frequent rape goes on and traumatizes lots of German women, the journalist devises a plan to search for the highest-ranking officer to ease their situation in exchange for her body. The journalist heads to Andre's post to seek help from him once again. However, the unlawful acts are out of Andre's control and he claims to not know anything about it. Sadly, the journalist leaves the post unable to get the response she desires. Hopeful, she attempts to search for another high-ranking officer to help her. On the streets, surrounded by soldiers, the journalist luckily encounters Lieutenant Anatole. She approaches him and attempts to seek help from him. Anatole agrees to protect their apartment in exchange for having sex with her. The journalist agrees. Back in the widow's apartment, Anatole and his men bring food and supplies to offer to the Germans. They joyously chatter in the dining area and brag about their trophies and previous occupations to the Germans. Later on, Anatole and the journalist have sexual intercourse in their room as per their deal earlier. Hunt by his conscience, Andre visits the journalist to help her this time. Masha, a Russian soldier, furiously yells at the journalist as she immediately presumes that the journalist has intentions to brainwash the commander. The journalist ignores her and goes on with her plan. She swiftly undresses in her room to seduce Andrei. However, Andrei does not intend to use her body, instead he leaves. At night, Anatole returns to the journalist's room. He comes and goes whenever he desires to have sex with the journalist. As expected, the journalist is bound to agree to his conditions due to the taboo formed from their deal. Meanwhile, in the journalist's apartment, the Silesian girl offers a little bread to Junger that she secretly acquires at the widow's apartment. Disappointed, Junger swiftly leaves to search for more food to sustain them while he carries his gun to use when needed too. Morning comes, Andrei and his men knock on the widow's apartment carrying food and supplies to offer to the Germans. They cook and joyously chatter with the Germans in the dining area. Suddenly, their conversation gets interrupted when Commander Andropov's men arrive to search for Junger, who's armed and stole food from them last night. Thereafter, Mussolini grows curious about the apartment in the attic, yet the journalist tells him that no one stays there. In wrath, Mussolini beats on an innocent German when he fails to find Junger in the house. Andrei, in spite of Mussolini's action, rushes to continuously beat him, then gets halted by one of his men. As all the soldiers exit the building, the journalist rushes to her apartment to check if Junger hides there. To her surprise, Junger appears and claims to dislike the idea of going back to Siberia. The journalist confusingly stares at the Silesian girl due to her unwelcome guest she fails to tell her about. Days pass, the journalist's apartment building is now under protection of Andrei and his men. The German women in the building grow taboos so that they don't get spontaneously raped every day by different men. Also, Andrei and the journalist grow closer each day and share secrets with one another. The journalist contemplates her status in a formal sexual relationship with Andrei and not in some sort of rape. Sometime later, Elke, the journalist friend, arrives at the widow's apartment. All the German women in the house gather to joyously chatter with Elke and the journalist. They all laughingly share their experiences on their sexual intercourse with the Russian soldiers. Elke then asks the journalist if she has heard from her husband, Gerd. Sadly, she has had no news about him for the past few weeks. One morning, Barbel calls on the journalist to head straight to a meeting room. As they arrive, they meet an anxious Russian soldier who orders the journalist to translate his words. His words fluster the journalist, making her hesitate to utter the translation. She refuses to believe his claims about the German soldiers killing innocent children, thus, she exits the room in a hurry. As she hurriedly walks, she comes across Andrei, who informs her of the fall of the old Germany. Masha, on the other hand, confrontingly reminds her to stay away from Andrei and reveals that the Germans killed his wife before. Later that day, a Russian soldier announces the death of the German leader, Adolf Hitler. The Red Army rejoices as they win the battle against the Germans and that the city of Berlin finally capitulates. They simultaneously chant whilst the Silesians and Germans grow worried of what will happen to them. At the same time, Friedrich, a Silesian, tells his wife Ilse that he has to go back to Siberia or else he'll be sent to prison or worse, executed. Ilse weeps as she refuses his desire to leave her and their family. Friedrich sobbingly decides to stay to make her feel at ease. Meanwhile, the Russian soldiers continue to celebrate in the streets of Berlin. They drink, dance and waste their bullets by firing it in the air. Andrei's men present gifts in the widow's house whilst Andrei plays the organ to entertain them. At night, the journalist and Andrei converses in their room whilst the Russian soldiers continue to rejoice in the street. They both watch the ongoing celebration through the room window while Andrei tells a story to entertain her. Later on, Petka forces his entry to the journalist's apartment while under intoxication. He discovers the Silesian girl and attempts to rape her when suddenly, Junger shoots him. The whole street of Berlin hears the gunfire and momentarily pauses their celebration. Furiously, Petka drags Junger and remorselessly throws him on the staircase. In an instant, Junger dies and the Russian soldiers rush to the scene to investigate. Andrei asks the Germans who own the apartment in the attic. To his surprise, the journalist blows the lid off. He orders her to return to her apartment whilst the other soldiers burn the Silesian girl to death. The news quickly reaches all the Russian soldiers in the streets of Berlin. The soldiers judgingly stare at Andrei and call him traitor for being the most associated person to the journalist. Bothered, he instantly rushes back to the journalist's room while carrying a bike he forcibly takes from one of the soldiers. As Anatole and the journalist are about to have sexual intercourse, Andrei breathlessly hurls his bike in front of them, then demands Anatole to leave the room. As Anatole leaves, Andrei warns the journalist of the capabilities of the Russian soldiers to shoot Germans without hesitation. Supposedly, the journalist is to reflect on her demeanor or it may cause her exile, or worse, execution. After a while, the Russian soldiers and Germans dance their hearts out and laugh as much as they want. Some Germans pretend to enjoy just to not ruin the joyous night of the soldiers. Ilse, on the other hand, joins them while leaving her husband, Friedrich, alone in their apartment. The next morning, Ilse finds her husband dead from drinking a poison. The journalist arrives and witnesses Ilse weepingly lying atop of her dead husband. She holds back her tears and quickly leaves to head straight to Andrei's post. After a while, the journalist discovers from Andropov the sudden transfer of Andrei to Siberia. Andropov hands her a piece of paper containing words from Andrei. Andropov leaves her afterwards. At the same time, Gert arrives yet the journalist expresses no emotion with his sudden reappearance. She hands him over her journal containing her experience for the past 6 weeks under Soviet invasion. Gert shows disgust to his wife for being touched by multiple men. The journalist ignores his opinion and leaves to search for Andrei instead. Luckily, Andrei and the journalist meet for the last time. The journalist expresses her gratitude towards him while she holds back her tears. They bid farewell and part their ways, not knowing if somehow they'll meet again. 2 days later, Gert leaves the journalist as well. Gert discovers that their apartment is no longer the home that it once was. He believes that her wife changes drastically and labels her shameless for being a hostess of the Russians. The journalist is now left all alone and is forced to work tirelessly to sustain her needs. The movie ends when the Russians leave, and the city of Berlin begins to reconstruct again. Thanks for watching. Subscribe for more videos like this and to help the channel grow.